Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Hope you're all well and happy today. It's a beautiful day here. We're going to get back into our very basic Bible study. We're calling this a slice of truth. We're looking at the book of Exodus. So today we're going to get into chapter 16. Now remember that toward the end of the last chapter, after the children of Israel had praised God for rescuing them from Pharaoh's army and all that they started to complain. And they complained about, well, we have no water. And God provided water for them. Now we're moving into chapter 16, and we're going to see what else they complain about. Okay, let's get into it. Chapter 16, verse 1. Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. This would have been a month after they left. Verse 2. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And we're going to see that this really isn't a grumbling against Moses and Aaron. It's actually against God, and that's going to be pointed out in subsequent verses. Verse 3. And the sons of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Again, they hark back. They just can't make that break with Egypt. We had it good there. Even though they were being persecuted, even though they were being tasked with a tremendous amount of labor, seems like you forget the bad parts and you remember the good parts. They had a good diet and their bellies were full, and that's what's important to them. Verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether or not they will walk in my instruction. So God's going to provide for them. He's going to give them some instructions, and he's testing them to see if they'll trust him and do what he says. Verse 5. And it will come about on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumblings against the Lord. What are we that you grumble against us? So it's reminding them, you're really not grumbling against us. We're just human beings. It's God that's providing for you. You're actually complaining against God, against the Lord. Verse 8. And Moses said, This will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and bread to the full in the morning. For the Lord hears your grumblings, which you grumble against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord. Verse 9. Then Moses said to Aaron, Say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumblings. Come to the Lord. Listen to what he has to say. Trust him. Do what he says. That's what's going to mean the difference in your relationship with him. You have to come close to the Lord. Verse 10, And it came about as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord is working all these great miracles for Israel, and as a reminder, one of the reasons he's doing that is he's chosen this people. Not because they're great, not because they're so wonderful, but he has chosen them for reasons of his own to make them his holy people. And he wants them to reflect God's love and grace and power and be a witness for God. He's chosen them. He's performing these miracles as a way of separating them out from other peoples, making them realize that he's dealing with them in a special way, to bond them together as a nation, to congeal them together as one people, a consolidating process so that they're all brought together as a nation. He does some tremendous miracles, and he's going to do even more. We'll see how the children of Israel react to that as we go along. But just a reminder of one of the reasons why he's doing these miracles. And one of them is that God is actually appearing to them in this cloud. Verse 11, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. Now we're going to see how the way he provides this meat and bread is going to, or should prove to them, that it is the Lord their God that is providing this for them. Verse 13, so it came about at evening that the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. So in the evening these birds came in, very nutritious little birds, huge numbers of them, which shows the miraculous part of this, because we're going to be reminded in a verse later on that this goes on for 40 years. Millions of people, think of how many little birds that requires to feed millions of people, and this happens every day. Every day. Verse 14, when the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. Miraculous. Again, 40 years this is going to take place. A lot of people have tried to explain this away. One scientist said, I figured it out. There was a comet that went by, and the comet exploded, and these chemicals interacted with the atmosphere, and it created this manna. Oh yeah, that explains how this went on for exactly 40 years until they went into the promised land, and it explains why we're going to see here in a minute there was twice as much before the Sabbath day, and then there was none on the Sabbath day. Yeah, no, it doesn't explain any of that at all. This is a divine, wonderful miracle. Verse 16, this is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he shall eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. And the sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much, and some gathered little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. So there was just enough for everybody. Some required more than others, and that was provided. Just an amazing situation. Verse 19, and Moses said to them, let no man leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses. A son left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. Remember what God said, this is a test to see if they'll do what I tell them. No, they don't. They always seem to have to learn the hard way. And not only that, now it's got Moses upset with them. Verse 21, and they gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat, but when the sun grew hot, it would melt. Now it came about on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will, bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning. Moses explaining to them what God is doing here. He's setting up this Sabbath day for this chosen people where they won't have to work. God's going to provide enough for them the day before so that they won't have to go out and gather or anything like that. The intent is that this will be a day that they can worship God and fellowship and commune with God. Verse 24. So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. And Moses said, Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. So God has made this wonderful provision for the Sabbath day. Verse 26, 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none. And it came about on the seventh day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? They can't listen, follow even the simplest instruction. God told them what was going to happen, but again, they only seem to learn by trial and error. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Isn't that what we do? Many times, yes. Verse 29. See, the Lord hath given you the Sabbath. Therefore he gives you bread for 2 days on the sixth day. Remain every man in his place, and let no man go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. I think this is what Jesus was referring to when he taught his disciples how to pray. Remember, part of that prayer was, Give us this day our daily bread. It's referring back to this. Each day God was providing them what they needed for that day. And on the day before the Sabbath, they got twice as much to provide for that next day. But it was basically a daily bread. That's what Christ was referring to. This manna also, the word manna means, you know what? What is it? Is an object lesson that Christ will use much later on when he refers to his own body as bread. We can talk about that later. It's just an amazing symbolism here of God's provision for the children of Israel. Verse 31, And the house of Israel named it manna, and it was like coriander seed white, and its taste was like wafers with honey. There are other verses in Numbers and Psalms that refer to the manna. And apparently it could be baked, it could be boiled, it could be prepared in different ways. So it wasn't something that became, super monotonous. But there was a tremendous provision. It could be prepared different ways. And the children of Israel learned during that 40 years to rely on God's provision. Verse 32. Then Moses said, This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer full of it be kept throughout your generations, that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, Take a jar and put an omer full of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. And we're going to save some of this. Verse 34. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. And I'll explain the testimony. Apparently, this is something in the future. So Aaron did this down the road. This is something he did later, but it's kind of a flash forward here. This is something he did in the future, because the testimony is the 10 Commandments, the tablets. And we're going to read later on that an ark was constructed, and the tablets were put in there, and a jar of manna was put in there, and Aaron's rod was put in there. So this is kind of a flash forward. Moses told Aaron to do it, and later on he did do that. Verse 35. And the sons of Israel ate the manna 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. Now an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. We're not quite sure how much that is, and it's not important. All we need to know is that it was sufficient in its amount. So what a tremendous book this is, this chapter. We see God's provision again. He provided water, now he's providing the food. He's provided a way for the food to be handled. The children of Israel are learning to trust him, learning to trust the Lord, learning to trust his provision for him. Now the reason that they eat this for 40 years is going to become evident in future chapters. But for right now, let's just leave it at that. God has provided for the children of Israel during this exodus from the land of Egypt. We're going to stop there today. I hope this has been interesting. To me, it's a kind of a fun book. It's very encouraging, seeing how God provided for all these millions of people. He's fully capable of providing for us today, and he does. Just really interesting to see these miracles. So I hope it's been interesting for you, and I hope you've found it meaningful. And I hope you'll watch the subsequent videos on the later chapters. In the meantime, God bless, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.